Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of everyone here at TeamLease Regtech, I welcome you to yet another special edition of our monthly discussions on an important compliance topic. My name is Rishi Agrawal. I'm the co-founder and CEO at TeamLease Regtech, India's leading regulatory technology company. Well, the world around us has changed massively in the last 2 years. Pandemic was a little more than a health crisis. It has changed how we learn, how we earn, and how we interact with the world around us. It has put the idea of business resilience, risk management, and sustenance to test. A number of organizations struggled in the first couple of months of the pandemic, trying to figure out how they can get a vast majority of their resources to work in the absence of human interactions in person. The pandemic has reminded us of the fact that the world is far from ideal and we need to better prepare ourselves for friction. All in all, pandemic brought the world of technology and digitization forward by almost a decade. It is also transforming the way companies do compliance. We are lucky to have a company of some of the thought leaders in the industry of compliance to deliberate with us on a very important topic today. I can't believe it is already December and the new year is just 3 more weeks away. One common property of new year is that we all take new year resolutions to plan for the year in advance. Compliance planning is no different. We thought we will discuss how compliance officers can plan transforming their organization's compliance in the new year with technology. I'm lucky to have an elite panel with me. Let me quickly introduce our panelists. Let me start with Dr. SANJEEV GEMAWAT. Dr. GEMAWAT is an Executive Director, Group General Counsel, and Group Company Secretary with Dalmia Bharat Group. He brings over 3 decades of rich experience spanning different industries such as automobiles, real estate, hospitality, manufacturing, among others. He's been associated with Indian as well as multinational companies, including DLF, JCB, Olivetti, GBC, and Modi Corp. Dr. GEMAWAT is a Chartered Secretary from India and UK, Chartered Accountant in Account Management, besides postgraduate in law and doctorate in insider trading. As a thought leader and strategist with business orientation, Dr. GEMAWAT is an acclaimed speaker and author on varied contemporary legal and industry-specific issues. He has shared his views at various national and multinational conferences. He has been honored as a top 100 General Counsels of India in various prestigious General Counsel lists as released by Forbes India, Business World, among others. He's been honored as one of the India's finest in-house counsels and the most influential corporate counsel and company secretary, and also inducted to Global Hall of Fame for his contribution to legal ecosystem in India and the world. That's Dr. GEMAWAT for you. Dr. GEMAWAT, thank you so much for being here with us. We really look forward to hearing from you. Our next participant today is Parvesh Kheterpal. Parvesh is Head Legal and Company Secretary of Feedback Infra Group. Parvesh brings over 20 years of experience working with the industry leaders. Prior to his current role, Parvesh worked with Lanco Group and Future Group, among the other big names. He has extensively worked on corporate restructuring, M&A transaction, high-stake litigations and arbitrations at both domestic and international levels, and also dealt with setting of businesses in different jurisdictions in Europe, US, South Africa, Singapore, among others. He's a law graduate from Delhi University and a fellow member of ICSI, also holds a master's degree in commerce. He's a regular speaker on various programs organized by professional institutes, industry chambers, and lawyers associations. He's a member of Task Force on Companies Act 2013, constituted by ICSI from 2016 to 2019. He's also an elected member of Gurgaon chapter, including being the chairman in 2013 of ICSI for the year between 2011 and 14. Parvesh has been featured in GC Power List India among the top 100 General Counsels of India by Legal 500 in 2018 and 19, and featured among the top 100 in-house counsel in the first edition of Trailblazer, a coffee table book published by ICCA in 2016. So that's Parvesh Kheterpal for you. Parvesh, welcome. Last but not the least, our participant is Vishal Garg. Vishal has been with Ericsson Group for over a decade now, with a career spanning over 27 plus years. He's a director, senior group legal counsel, Southeast Asia, Oceania, and India for Ericsson Group, and company secretary of the Ericsson India. He's a law graduate and member of ICSI. Vishal specializes in big ticket customer deals for Ericsson in the new and emerging technology contracts. He has been instrumental in several key deals and initiatives for his organization. He has also successfully executed and advised on some of the large litigation matters. Additionally, he is interested in art, technology, and photography. He is willing to always share his perspective and is a regular public speaker as well. Vishal, welcome. Vishal and I share our hobbies in photography. I'm in the middle of publishing a coffee table book as well. So Vishal, we'll catch up on photography after the meeting.
Thank you so much.
Well, just like we discussed, management of compliance is far from easy. We've often used the word regulatory cholesterol when talking about compliance management in India. Today, I'm lucky to be in the company of three great leaders who come from a varied background. Dr. GEMAWAT comes from manufacturing, Indian multinational, his career has spanned decades, brings in deep expertise, has seen the evolution of India's compliance space, knows what used to be 20 years ago and how the world has changed in the last 20 years. Vishal comes from telecom, large deal, technology. Parvesh comes from infrastructure. All of these are very compliance intensive industries. Before we get into the conversation and I invite my panelists to start talking about specifics, let me lay a quick foundation so that we are all on the same page regarding the complexity of compliance. Here's a quick slide that gives you an overview of compliance ecosystem in India. India's entrepreneurs are regulated by about 1,536 different acts, 69,233 compliances, with about 6,618 unique filings across the law of the land. No one company needs to do all of these. However, a company which migrates from a single entity, single business, single state operation to a multi-entity, multi-business, multi-state operation, the number of compliances can easily move from a few hundred to several thousand, and for larger entities, tens of thousands of compliances in a year. These compliances are broken down into 7 broad categories, led by labor, which is 30% in terms of acts, 47% in terms of compliances, contributes about 32,000 compliances among the 69,000 total. It's a concurrent subject. Both state and center legislate laws on labor, and we are in the middle of a massive codification exercise that got started in 2002 and hopefully will end sometime soon. But that's labor for you. EHS stands for Environment, Health and Safety, deals with all of Environment Protection Act of 1986 and all the relevant rules around solid waste management, e-waste management, hazardous waste management, air, water, soil pollution, consent to establish, consent to operate, and many other kinds depending on the nature of operations that the company does. Finance and taxation, as the name suggests, deals with direct tax, indirect tax, customs, FEMA, advanced tax, income tax, GST, and all other areas related to finance and tax. Commercial deals with hoist, lifts, equipments, basically. Pressure vessels, boilers, tools, tackles, gas holders. These are all examples of items under commercial. Secretarial deals with company law, SEBI law, and all of those items for company law matters. Industry specific is regulatory, TRAI for telecom, IRDAI for insurance, FSSAI for food, RBI for financial services, and so on. And that's really the law of the land for you. We have done a lot of deep research with about 70 lawyers working over 7 years to put this data together. We've also mapped the regulatory cholesterol across the map of India, and this is a breakdown between center and states. As you can see, out of 69,233, almost 25,000 plus compliances are at the central level. The rest of them are at the state level. Moving on, when we talk about statutory compliances, just as a reminder, and I'm sure a number of practitioners in the audience today realize this, but just as a memory jogger, we deal with the compliance across the law of the land, which includes all kinds of licenses, registrations, permissions, consent orders, returns, registers, challans, payments, remittances, displays, all of these are indicative examples, and there are more. But just as a memory jogger, this is what it is. Compliance are at 3 levels: central, state, and local, 7 categories that we just spoke about, and 3 types: time-based, event-based, and checklisted. So this is really the complex compliance environment that India's compliance officers deal with. This is the complexity that they end up navigating. Bring Dr. GEMAWAT into the conversation. Dr. GEMAWAT, you bring a tremendous amount of experience and expertise. You've seen the evolution of compliance over the last couple of decades. You've seen where it was, where it is. Tell our audience about what are the challenges of compliance management in an Indian organization.
Well, Rishi, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to share my views on this platform. And I'm indeed impressed with the kind of work which TeamLease is doing as far as compliance ecosystem is concerned. Certainly, Rishi, I like those, that presentation and those slides. That the first slide itself suggests that 1,536 acts, 69,000, over 69,000 compliances, over 6,600 filings. Now, this is what the compliance ecosystem is. I remember, I think for the first time in the economic survey of 2019-20, the certain illustrative list was mentioned. And in that list, what was mentioned is that there are nearly over 67,000 compliance requirements for a manufacturing organization, and which include the illustrative list, indicated 51 acts, over 3,200 sections, and over 3,600 or 3,500, various rules and regulations and compliance requirements. Now, in this perspective, we need to understand a corporate entity, whose main objective is to do business. They end up doing these kind of activities. So that itself suggests that this is what the ecosystem is, and this is what the challenge is. Now, but this challenge is multifold. As you rightly pointed out in your presentation, that the compliances are, one is event-based compliances, time-based compliances, or some checklist-based compliances. So traditionally, I have seen organizations following the process whereby filing of returns, filing of forms, they were the key areas of compliances, but then that period is over now. The period has changed now. Today, the period is that if you don't comply with the law, if you don't comply with the rules and regulations, you end up having an environment whereby that would be impacting your organization, and that impact is so severe that you will end up having closing down of the operations. Now, in this ecosystem, when you have those kinds of threats, those kinds of severity of non-compliances, it's obvious that you need to do something different in terms of to take care of your business. And as I normally say, that as a professional, what is my role? My role as a compliance person is to protect my business or enable my business in terms of doing the continuation of the organization. Now, frankly speaking, the compliance ecosystem so far, organizations talked about compliances, but then organizations have given lip service to this compliance framework. Now, organizations somewhere fail in terms of doing compliances in letter and spirit. But then time has changed now, and why I say I use the word that the time has changed. What exactly has changed? What has changed is that the regulatory environment is increasing. All industries, irrespective of which all industry you are talking about, whether that is a telecom or real estate or hospitality or mining, or you name any industry, all are highly regulated, and they work in a system, in an environment where they are dealing with the bureaucracy, which is having a socialist mindset. So the system, the infrastructure is such that the bureaucracy would always be, even if you are doing the right thing, they would be doubting you in terms that you are doing something wrong. Now, in this environment, you need to have your compliance process so robust that you can defend yourself, that if any allegation of any nature comes. And that is exactly the reason why the organizations today are shifting from compliance, from lip service, to compliance as a commitment. And as you know, you remember, Rishi, a couple of decades back, when we started talking about EHS issues, we started about safety issues first. All organizations in their first presentation and first slide, they used to say the safety is the, safety slide used to be first. And I think that created a compliance culture, created a culture in terms of, that safety is the key as far as all your processes are concerned. Now, similar is the situation today, that compliances need to be taken care of. You rightly pointed out that the COVID situation has impacted compliances in terms of use of technology, and rightly so. But then let me tell you, Rishi, one most important contribution in the whole system, and which would be impacting compliances in future, is the ESG framework which we are talking about. Now, ESG framework mandates that you need to have your compliance process so robust, systematic, and also it should be so comprehensive that you can take care of those situations in the times to come. And why? For the simple reason that environment is of the integrated reporting as far as listed companies are concerned, or the major companies are concerned, integrated reporting, or you can say that the BRSR reporting. Now, how would you be doing that BRSR reporting? Now, so for the simple reason that now, in an environment of this nature, the traditional mindset, Rishi, I'm using the word traditional mindset, because traditional mindset mandated always that we should not have structured compliances in place. We should not have documented based compliances in place, because if suppose someone comes to know about our documented non-compliances, we would be hanged. I think that mindset needs to be changed now, because even otherwise, BRSR reporting or ESG reporting, we will end up having those kind of reportings even otherwise. So I think that change in the mindset is required. And in the end, I would say that compliance needs to be a commitment. And the moment the compliance is commitment, I think that we will achieve what we want to achieve. Yeah, thanks.
Dr. GEMAWAT, very well said. Some of the items that you mentioned, I'm going to go back to the recording and make sure I can take notes from that recording, but wonderfully said. I just want to add one point here. It's not the 1536 Act with 69,000 that scares me. What scares me even more is the dynamic and fluid nature of the law of the land.
Yes.
Believe it or not, in a typical year, the country sees about 3,600 to 4,000 regulatory changes.
Yes.
A lot of them are at central level, so it affects every enterprise regardless of which state you belong to.
Yes.
We have done an assessment recently, and we found that a small pharma company that operates in a single state, and pharma being a case in point, similar numbers are there for other industries as well. A small pharma company operating in a single state with one manufacturing plant is affected by between 500 to 700 regulatory changes in a year.
Yes.
Now, if you look at 250 business days on an average, you're dealing with about 2.5 change on a typical day basis. These changes are published on various government websites. We have a count of 2,233 websites between center, state, and local laws.
Yes.
None of these have subscription facility today. None of these have searching, sorting, or RSS feeds today. If you need to know what has changed, the expectation is for you to find these links, know which page they publish notifications on, and actually periodically visit them. That is extremely counterproductive when done in a manual environment.
Yes.
So just adding to the complexity that you articulated, let me bring in Parvesh into the conversation. Parvesh, you come from a large infrastructure background, lots of projects, different vehicles for getting these projects going. There is a life cycle to these projects. You operate in different states. These projects can be there anywhere. And I'm sure you see these problems from a different lens. We would like to hear from you. What are your observations around complexity of compliance management in India?
Right, Rishi. And so starting from your presentation, Rishi, like that again reminded me, oh, we are still on 69,000+ compliances. Is there anything I'm missing in my system? That just gave me an alert by seeing that. So in my system, Rishi, we are conducting our weekly review from this 69,000 numbers. I'm just wanting to catch this topic again in my review meeting to various teams sitting in the different parts of India. Like just don't give me the status of the existing compliance checklist which we have, but let's find out we are not missing anything. But you are right, as Sanjeev said, that complexity in our system, I will take it in two ways. One, the system and the ecosystem and the structure is so complex that so many acts, so many compliances which we have to deal with, central and the state. And though my previous organization and in this organization, where we have our businesses in most of the states in India and so many countries outside India. So that system is complex. Second is the mindset of the organization. So couple of years from the, like I can see that the mindset is changing, but still that has not changed. Why compliance has been taken as a cost to the organization? Or the traditional mindset which Sanjeev has referred, that is it really required to do those compliances? I'm just trying to target those companies which are small, or even few big companies, maybe like I'm giving this disclaimer at my end, but I will say with this authority that few of the big companies as well, whether these compliances are required in system, or if we don't do, then what is the repercussion? And can we manage it? So these were the few points in system which were not bringing complete compliance system in process for our Indian INC. So we have seen in our organization, in previous organization, you know that thousands of compliances were applicable on us. And at one point of time, even I have been made in charge, being the compliance officer, to deal with that. You won't believe that we took 6 months to prepare our system that yes, these are the compliances we need to comply with. Few of the compliances were on record, but when we make it some automated system, and those 6 months, even I was a spoke for few departments, and I am happy to say here in the first 2 months, there were 19,000 pending compliances. I'm saying that updating those compliances on system, 19,000 updation were required, which were in the file. There was no tracking, and people who were doing it, if left the organization, that has gone with them. So the mindset of the management are changing. They are now willing to go for compliances. Only thing is that who is the person responsible to bring that culture in the system? I understand it's a top-down approach. This compliance system is a separate business of the organization. We have to align with our complete business. There is one compliance department which has to work on meeting these compliances on a day-to-day basis. If the top management is not willing to work on that, this system will always remain complex. It cannot start with the executioner that they are doing the compliances. Whatever job has been assigned to them, they will do that. And second, I will say it's not only the top management to do for their organization, but we have to bring a culture in our system that our stakeholders, our vendors, our clients have to understand the compliance of the organization, and they have to deal in the way that is not only required for one organization, but it's a complete system which have to make the compliance. Compliance requirement, being a compliance officer, you know, it's my responsibility to bring that. We are doing that. We are trying to change the mindset of management. Management is somewhat has come, Indian INC management has somewhat has come to bring that system in place, which you know that bringing the compliance level high. Secondly, different compliances of different departments. You have said that we have different coming from labor, industry specific, safety, environment, F&A and laws. So the gap in system is sometimes this compliance officer, so-named compliance officer, is only doing compliance, secretarial, legal, and finance and taxation. That gap we have always seen in the system. So labor compliance is only HR is doing, and safety and environment compliance is business team is doing. Though they know the business, but the compliance requirement is not up to the level which a compliance officer can do. So that integration in the system, which is still not there, I can see so many organizations, that integration is required either at the organization level or at a one-stop compliance management tool or the system at the under the gap of one compliance officer, which can help this. So coming to the last point where I told that first 3 months, 19,000 compliances were there to be uploaded on a system. Good that it took 6 months to bring that level. So after 6 months, we could reach at a level of zero compliance updation in the system. but that is a requirement. I think things will come, and the system which TeamLease and you are bringing in system that will certainly help to the compliance officer like me to bring all compliances on record at an appropriate time, so that they can help my management, my independent director, who always see my face while signing the board report that all compliances are in process and everything is complied with. So that will be helpful for the individual as well as the organization.
Parvesh, you bring up some very interesting points. I'll like to add 1 or 2 points to it. In a typical year, I'm lucky to meet with several hundred executives around the country, and these executives are from across industries. At least 20 to 30 industries. We currently work with about 45 different industries, but in a typical year, I'm talking to executives from these. You know, one of the common problems that I find, most CEOs, managing directors, even board members, think that their compliance burden for their organization is a couple of hundred compliances a year. That is their understanding of the complexity of compliance. And when I show them the data, because we have extensive data, been working in the industry for a long time, I tell them that even the smallest of the companies with only a single entity, single plant, single location, today deals with anywhere between 700 to 900 compliances. And you are a 1,000 crore organization with 5 plants, 7 estate operation, several offices, sales offices, warehouses. The number of compliances that you would be dealing with will be in excess of 5,000. They're shocked. And I follow it up by a quote saying, ignorance of the law is not an excuse for poor compliance. So I think while the country has made some change, the education, the sensitivity, awareness is going up, but the law is complex, quantitatively and qualitatively requires much deeper focus than just appointing one compliance officer and saying, now there is one throat to choke. And if things don't get done, I'm going to come after you. So I think very well said. That was a point I thought I'll share. Vishal, telecom, highly regulated. We've been working on telecom for a while. What are your thoughts on challenges?
I think the challenges, as all three of you narrated, I would say all encapsulate into a couple of points if I were to really summarize it and add thereon. I would say it is all about the count, first and foremost. Just like the Indian population, we have everything enacted under a separate statute, not talking to each other, like the Indian departments of water and electricity and road. As soon as a road comes up, the next few months you will think that this is all good now, and then somebody digs it up to lay a water pipeline. And that's what I think is ailing the entire statutory governance landscape, if you permit me to say so, essentially because everyone wants reporting to be done on a particular context to them. So you might have one wing not talking to another, therefore you have 5 different enactments. And then similarly, even if the subject is same, like the shops and establishments of all the states, they don't talk to each other virtually. So while we may talk about unity of India, it's like the diversity of India is what you see the moment you talk about any legislation and the implementation thereof. It's like a joke to say that we are moving ahead. And I think it all boils down to then talking about what you said, collation of the universe, if I may use that word, of what applies to you. To be able to defend yourself, you have to know your enemy, right? So here, let me be frank, we all don't know our enemies, right? And then we also have limited vision, and we don't know how many of the soldiers are joining the enemy's army each day. As you rightly pointed out, a couple of thousand changes happen, right? So if you might have killed or neutralized, as Parvesh said, a couple of thousand of them, in his case, he at least listed and knew that these are the soldiers for the army. Unfortunately, those 3,000 will rise up each year and will come back to haunt him. And then condensing it in one fashion, let's say, if I'm a company operating in 20 states due to my, let's say, FMCG network, it is virtually a task to really get that space, get it leased, get it compliance done for. And believe me, no organization in true sense is able to do that. And that's why you find companies like Walmart and biggies of the biggest global giants ultimately found guilty of something like seeking a license, right? Whether it takes you to an ABC non-compliance or it takes you to a license non-compliance or doing something foolish to get that cleared out. I think, and then it all boils down to also from a perspective, are you able to communicate? And I think that communication is missing sheer in the sense, due to the vision as we shared just now, that a compliance department or a legal department is even today largely seen by the Indian entrepreneur as a cost element, right? Unfortunately, that's not the vision of the multinationals, in my experience. While we are changing in our entrepreneurship mindset, wherein you say that, okay, fine, let me have an independent board of directors, right? So the promoter and the founder and the father figure of a group like Tatas and Birlas are stepping to let the board be taken over. But the truth of the matter is, are you really changing in the mindset of the way you want to run the operation? You might have independence of thought today in the board, but has it translated to the entire operations and their implementation? I don't think that's happening. And if I were to talk about the issues ailing us, I would say the most fundamental summary pointed issue to me is that no particular thing talks to each other. No statute talks to each other, no government department talks to each other, no government department's implementation or compliance or your submissions as a corporate talks to each other. And it becomes so ridiculous. I'll give you a very small couple of examples and probably I'm able to illustrate what I'm saying. So let me ask you how many private companies versus public companies we have. I'm sure I don't have statistics, probably you will have. But I can assure you
1.1 million companies, out of which under 8,000 are listed companies that are doing okay. So you're dealing with close to 1.1 million, which is 11 lakh companies out there, and under 10,000 are listed companies.
But let me bifurcate it in for the sake of convenience in public and private for a moment, right? And then now talk about the private enterprises, where in my 25 years of experience, I've seen that the shareholding, the directorship doesn't change for several years, right? But at the same time, we today even go to the Companies Act, comply by virtue of filing each year a thing called annual report, which is financials, and an annual return, which is essentially details about the directorships and some of the shareholdings. Now, believe me, I have moved on from a practice era to employment with 3 big corporates and seen, let's say, 50 organizations in different industries. All the entities, big, especially the MNCs, would operate as a private company usually. The shareholdings would never change even over a decade. In my, let's say, only 2 changes. Why do you need that form every year to be filed? There's no need, right? So the necessity has not been tested at all. Nobody's asked the user whether do you find veracity, validity, logic in what you're doing, right? Nobody questions. It's like top down, you're told to do 5,000 things, finished. No logics around that. Now, compare it, let's say, in an example where I was doing some compliance for a UK company, where there's a form called change form. They need to file it annually or on an event based. As and when something changes, let's say their directors change, they need to file that particular form. It says directorship changes and they file this person gone and this person received. Why can't we do that? So one form taken away, and then what you do is, then people don't file that because they believe there is nothing to comply because nothing has changed. And then you get to a place where the Prime Minister has to go ahead and actually remove 2 lakh companies from the register of companies registrar. Now, why do you need all that? So I think what we need here and what the problem is essentially the mindset, which was all regulatory, let's say, holding you by the neck. I think we are in the era of now self-regulation. I think once that changes, which I think thankfully in a couple of last years with Prime Minister Modi, that is seemingly changing. And I'll just stop by taking a last example. I think we need a reform just like the tax reforms GST, right? We need a reform wherein we look at regulatory compliance as a holistic one piece, having some components and which all integrate into one, so that the persons who need to comply can do it easily. That is one. Secondly, the departments who need to have it complied can possibly look at the compliance again easily. They can catch hold of the offenders easily, because then the errors and the mismatches will be apparent, unlike a Indian founder who could possibly file 2 kinds of balance sheet, one with the bank and one with the ROC, and it will go unnoticed for 20 years unless the account goes NPA. I think that's what needs to change. And I believe technology on the company side, the government side, and as a whole is already helping that and will transform the way we see it. And probably, thankfully, with your efforts and institutions like you, I think we'll be able to comply till it does not go down in number. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Vishal, you hit the nail on the head there. We have actually been working with a concept, a 3-vector framework of rationalize, decriminalize, and digitize. Rationalize is where you mentioned there are compliances, half of them, they don't make sense. There's a lot of duplication, there's a lot of overlap, there's redundancy. In labor alone, there are 2,745 unique forms under about 17 or 18 acts and rules at state levels. The same return or a same register or a same item that needs to get done, different states have different formats. For a single company within a state, we did an assessment and found that there were at least 10 different formats of wage registers. There were at least 6-7 different formats of leave and attendance and muster roll registers. There were at least 5 different accident register formats under different acts. Now, we worked with one particular state in the country, identified these, and they went ahead and notified a reduction of 493 such overlapping, duplicate, and irrelevant compliances. And I'm sure if this exercise is done nationally, the overall compliance burden will come down. And from a hostile compliance environment where the primary driving theme is prohibited until permitted, we can get to a point where it becomes more rational. Compliance is not viewed as a burden for entrepreneurs. It is viewed as something which is a business enabler, because it creates institutional practices around safety, around social security, around benefits to employees, employers, shareholders, and overall raises what Dr. GEMAWAT alluded to from an ESG point of view. So I think we've come to the end of the first part of our discussion, where the 3 experts with collectively between them over 75 years of experience around compliance management spoke about the challenges from their own lens, from their own vantage points. What we'll do is, I want to bring our audience into the picture. There is a very short poll that we have, just about 8 or 9 questions. I would like that poll to come up, and I do request our panelists also to take 30 seconds or 45 seconds and answer those questions. And we'll share the results at the end of our webinar today. Let's now move to the solution side of this equation. We've discussed problems threadbare. We've heard from experts from the industry as to what the problem is. But if we are hoping that legislations will change and compliance will become simple, and that's when we'll start complying, my friends, let me pause and tell you, hope is not a strategy. We need to take things under our control, use the best practices, create a culture of compliance, start top down, bring our management, our executive and our board, take them into confidence, create empowerment, spread education and awareness, incentivize people who demonstrate good behavior, penalize those who still drag their feet. All of these are examples of things that need to get done to create a culture of compliance. We are now in December, 3 more weeks before we get into the new year. Let me bring Dr. GEMAWAT back into the conversation. Dr. GEMAWAT, what is your mantra for our upcoming compliance professionals across the country? What should they do differently in 2022? How should technology be looked at from transformation? How should they create a culture of compliance? Your views, please.
Interesting discussion, Rishi. First, let me tell you that it's not difficult. Compliance is possible. Compliance is not that difficult. I think, we need to start with this positive statement. But then with this realization that we are in an imperfect world which suggests that despite of your best of the compliances, you end up committing one or the other mistakes. So it essentially means what? It essentially means that yes, despite of all those odds and imperfections in the system, you need to create that compliance culture. Now, what is this compliance culture? That compliance culture to me is that where in an organization, the compliance becomes a pivotal part or immutable part of the overall culture of the corporate entity. Unless it becomes a pivotal and immutable part of that culture, you cannot bring that compliance culture in the system. But then how to bring that compliance culture in the system? Obviously, there should be one or the other trigger events. Because unless you have that trigger event, that the top-down approach, which I think Parvesh was also mentioning, you also mentioned, the top-down approach cannot come unless the trigger event happens. Trigger event, one is you can always, as a compliance officer, you can suggest something, a trigger event, or organizations realize because of one or the other incidents. Let me give you very simple examples. A salesperson exchanging the price information with some of his colleagues, and it's normal. There is no intention. There is no intention of cartelization. But then his exchange of that information might lead to a problem whereby some notice would come and that there is some cartelization. Now, these are small incidents, but then there are bigger incidents as well. You might not be having an illegal borewell at your place, but you are sourcing water from someone who is illegally sourcing that water. That might lead to closure of your plant. Now, these are basics. Your plant can be closed at any point of time without your fault also. Now, just think about it. If you are involved in those non-compliances, what would happen? So unless you understand those trigger events in terms of severity, Rishi, I'm not right now talking about those time-based compliances, filing of returns or those forms, etc. That would at best have some fine, some additional fee, etc. I'm not talking on that. The compliance officer needs to understand that all that non-compliances might ultimately lead to, one is a liability, whether strict liability or absolute liability or vicarious liability. That is one part. But then the second part is also that may lead to collapsing of your business. Now, the moment you realize that, organizations would define and redefine their mission statement, their vision statement, their value system. The moment you have redefining of this, there should be an essential part of compliances, transparency, and disclosure. Unless that essential part you have in your mission statement, your top-down approach cannot come. So one is realization through the trigger event, either your own experience or somebody else's experience. The second is you need to define it under your vision statement, because then only the top-down approach can come. Then the other important part comes, Rishi, and where you are contributing significantly, is that you need to have your compliance process, not a legalistic compliance process. You need to have very, very, simply worded, comprehensible, understandable kind of compliance process. Now, I'm right now not talking about technology. I'm just giving you a simple example, Rishi. The compliances are not required to be done by the compliance officer or the legal officer. Compliances are ultimately done by those very people who are at the ground level. Now, if you ask them with some provision of the Environment Act that whether you have received this particular license under this particular section of the Environment Act or under this section of the Air and Water Act, they will not understand this. but then they would understand those simple terms. EC, have you received EC? They can answer EC. If you ask them consent to establish or consent to operate, they will not understand this. And then if you link it with the company, with the relevant sections of the Air and Water Act. But then if you ask them CTA idea, you have CTO, they will understand. They know their job. The only thing is you need to streamline that, channelize that, and use those processes and systems which are easily comprehensible. So as I said, that compliance is not that difficult. Yes, we have a plethora of laws and regulations. We have a complete cobweb of system, and then we have a bureaucracy which has a socialist mindset, who will always be seeing you with that doubt. But then despite all those odds and imperfections in the system, the moment you make your processes simple, easily understandable, comprehensible, you will achieve your results. Then the next thing comes, Rishi, where in the last few years, organizations like you or individually, you have contributed significantly in terms of use of technology. Now, organizations have been apprehensive in terms of use of technology because they always thought that a systematic and structured data of non-compliance would be harmful for the organization. But the future is not with that apprehension. That apprehension would remain for 6 months, 1 year. But then once you streamline your processes, you have a technology-based systems, you would be in a position to create that compliance culture. Also, this would add significantly in terms of training of people at various levels. And I think there the technology plays its role. Technology is essential, Rishi, today. It is essential, I say so, because as Vishal pointed out, I think self-regulation. The future is self-regulations. Laws are changing. And since the laws are evolving, laws are changing, there would be more and more self-regulation. Now, when there's a more and more self-regulation, the onus is on the companies, onus is on the corporates, that you need to comply with the law. Now, if you don't, then there would be strict penalties, strict fines, or this severity level would be too high. Now, in that process, if you have a documented system through technology and that use of technology in each and every part of their compliance process, I think you would achieve your results. And last point, which I want to mention is that the compliance should be linked with the ethics. Compliance cannot be on a standalone basis in terms of only following the rules and regulations. Compliance needs to be linked with the ethics, and the moment you do this, you will be in a position to create that compliance culture, and which is what is required if we want to have a successful and effective compliance management system. Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent, Dr. GEMAWAT. A couple of points there, very well said. Self-regulation is the future, but self-regulation assumes that organizations mean to comply. They are not trying to evade or avoid. That's one. Second, there has to be awareness, not just at the level of compliance officers, but all the executives who shoulder the load of compliance. In a typical organization, your HR compliances are typically managed by an HR head, finance compliances are taken care of by the CFO or finance head, and so on and so forth. So there needs to be a common shared understanding and awareness, linkage back to the values where non-compliance, voluntary non-compliance is not an option. Systems have to bubble up these non-compliances quickly. Intervention needs to be possible so that before the risk becomes unbearable, where lockdowns can happen, criminalization can happen. And on that, I want to quote one piece of information. We are very soon going to release a report on criminalization. Of the 69,233 compliances, Dr. GEMAWAT, that we have in the country, 26,134 bear criminality jail term, going from 3 months all the way to 10 years. So that means almost 35 to 40% of these have criminality. And today, if somebody wants to come after you, and there are 59 inspectors, just as a number, that can come after a company, 13 of which are labor inspectors, right? Who can come to you in various ways. Yes. If such a scenario exists, a hostile environment is there, the onus is on the corporate to have a strong, robust compliance management practices with document management, awareness of non-compliances, reasons for non-compliances, awareness of the residual risk, so that one fine morning you are not putting a shareholder's interest at risk.
Absolutely.
So great. I mean, I always love to hear you, and some of these thoughts, as I said, I'm going to convert them into a blog at some point in time with attributable back to you. Parvesh, let me bring you back. You come from a different background, Lanco, feedback, many other infra companies. What are the best practices? Some of these infra companies, they don't necessarily bring in the multinational culture, which is higher in terms of corporate governance, risk management, compliance. A lot of them are brick and mortar businesses. They've come up ground up. The nature of culture is probably different from a traditional multinational organization. What are your views on what can be done differently?
Yes, Rishi, even Sanjeev has covered so many points. There's a good points to think also. But just to add few points in that, in fact, I understand culture of compliance, as we told that it's a top-down approach and senior management should have a thought, or it should be part of your business ethics that compliance and governance, we should be the fully compliant and governed company. So I understand the compliances in an organization are generally hit in 3 levels. One is statutory compliances. Second, I will say these are some of the forced compliances. I will cover that forced compliances, and company complying the compliance on voluntary basis. Statutory compliances, we already touched that 60,000 plus compliances are there. Even and under statutory compliances, I will say few are high risk and few are low risk. High risk compliances are those compliances, even companies are categorizing high risk those compliances where the government department are active to find you compliance or non-compliance. Even few of the compliances where government departments, few of the statute or government departments are not active to find that companies are complying with, even those are the criminal in nature. So companies, generally the culture in such a way, which are high risk, like if you don't file, you will get a notice, complete it. And if you are the low risk, no one is going to ask you any question for next 10 years. Okay, we can compromise on those compliances. I'm giving you the culture which is going on in the Indian mindset. So let's not do it, or we'll do it when the time comes. Second comes to forced business requirement or the forced compliances. Like I worked with a small organization initially at the start of my profession, where we were the export house. We were bound to comply with the labor laws because being the export house, like our business with the foreign countries under the quota system, at that time quota was there. We can supply under that quota. So they took that undertaking and have that inspection at our premises that you are complying with the labor laws or not. So I remember, and even that was a question at that time. So that was more restricted on the labor compliances. So because that was forced for us to comply with, even I took the other compliances, the mindset was, okay, you are the compliance officer, you see what you want to do, or the head of my organization, you discuss with him which are required to be done at this time, do it, otherwise we'll see. Then third comes on the voluntary making the compliances. There may be other than statutory compliances, like statutory compliances are there which you are complying with. Sanjeev referred that if you are working with an organization those are not complying, your vendor are not complying any of the statutory compliances, then your system should come in such a way that you should find out that whether they are complied or not. No doubt, sometimes it's impact on the business, but that culture should be there in the system that one should comply with that. I'll give you one example of my organization. We are bidding for few projects where we are the toll collector in one of our organization, one SPV. So being the toll collector, if we bid for the project, we have seen that we have to lose few of the bids because competitor is a small organization. They don't follow minimum wages, they don't follow bonus. So if they are not doing that, that will immediately impact my business. So and sometimes I am the showstopper in my organization, no, this transaction cannot happen. Like I remember one of the FEMA transaction, which I said no, and typically it took 3 months to authenticate my no by statutory auditors and by outside agencies that yes, we cannot do because it's an impact on the compliances. So the volunteer compliances, I will say, the culture is not a one-day job. Change of culture is not a one-day job. In general parlance, we generally say change of culture requires generation. So in business also, I will go with the same point that change of culture requires change of generation. So if the business generation has changed, professional CEOs has come, and Indian mindset, I will use the Lala company has bringing themselves forward that they want to grow and they want to globalize their business, then this culture change will certainly bring that compliance into the system. Otherwise, if you are thinking at a lower level, you are doing your business, you are just coming forward with a thought of making money, then you cannot change the culture of the compliances. So So this was the problem to bring that culture. The who is responsible or who is the person that can bring that culture into the system. I will say compliance officer is the one person who can bring this, who can start bringing this culture in the organization. So that's the reason the value of compliance officer is coming, like legal head or the compliance officer that is coming. Like just outsourcing the compliance by an organization is not the one solution. Just getting all departments doing their own work or compliances at their own end without any collaboration, without any coordination with each other is not the solution. So compliance officer is the one person who is reporting to the audit committee, who is reporting to the board. That person should bring that culture into the system. Audit committee is always concerned that whether all compliances of the organization are being done or not. Coming to the point that one compliance certificate is being placed with the audit committee or the board. So what does that cover? So I have seen the organization, all compliances are done except delay filing of GST return. And I have seen in the organization where we have to give a complete detailed chart to my independent director, giving compliance of each division, though they are not discussing each and every compliance. But while preparing that chart, I know I'm not feeling anything which is not correct or which is not true. So that brings the culture. Writing a line that all compliances are made except few delay filing in the system, that does not give the complete background. So that is the compliance officer on the audit committee side. Now the compliance officer bringing that culture, the role of compliance officer, that he should be given enough authority and the power in the system that if he should like the other business heads for this role, he should not hesitate to go to them, even they are senior or junior, that he has that responsibility and authority to find that compliances are made or not. Then only culture can be done. In our system, if being a compliance officer of 10 years experience, if he's going to CEO and asking one question, 80% cases, CEO will say, "Kal aana," that the system, that things will be over. So he will not make that. He will not go back and ask his compliance ka kya hua. So I'm giving those examples from my experience in a small organization to big organization, and then bringing some integrated system in the organization. So getting those compliance done at a different levels, I have seen does not serve the purpose. Even those compliances are done, those teams are giving me certificate that these compliances are completed, but till the time that is authenticated by a report, even a system generated report, then only that can be possible. Otherwise, 69,000 compliances, if 10,000 compliances are applicable to me, and on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, different changes are coming through statute, I cannot have that record manually. Manual recording and manual control is not possible. That is only possible through a technology. So technology-driven system, even based on AI, I think your system must be using that AI. So that even I am advocating these things from a couple of years when discussing on this forum, that these AI-based or machine learning-based systems can only help us to reach to the level of compliances. Even in my organization, I have started to vet my simple contract, which are general in nature, and we are bidding for hundreds of bids in a week. So those basic points should be vetted by AI or machine learning based system, so that I will not spend time on that. I can find those. So cultural change, yes, it is required. It's a top-down approach. It should be part of your business ethics. Then you will do it. And compliance officer is the best person to bring that into system, and an integrated and collaborated approach in the system. So at one place that control will be there. That should be that is required at an organization level. Coming from the regulatory side, regulators should come forward. We discussed sometime that why 69,000 compliances? Can we reduce it to 30,000? So that is the one requirement. I always advocate that 69,000 compliances are not required. As you mentioned that 5 type of wage registers are required to be maintained of a different acts by the same company. So that should be combined. Probably this start of Gati to Shakti, that process probably will lead to these kind of things also. And self-regulatory. I will second that point of Sanjeev. Self-regulation, we have already seen from FERA to FEMA. Self-regulatory compliances, no doubt compliance will not reduce, but you know what compliances you have to do, when you have to inform. And it's not a license Raj or Danda Raj, but you have to do compliances at your end. And if by chance you miss anything, there are compounding provision are there, but one-time compounding, after that you have to comply at your end. So my take is culture requires generation change. So that generation has already gone, new generation has come. So with the help of compliance officer, legal head, and the integrated tool in the system, we can bring that culture and make our not only organization, but our country as a governed, best governed, compliant INC in the system.
Well said, Parvesh. On the front of compliance certificate, this was a pain point a while ago. We did a quick survey. We found that a typical compliance officer, even for a small company, can take anywhere from 1 week to 2 weeks to just compile information so that they can provide not an anecdotal, but an evidence-based compliance certificate to the board. We took that very seriously, worked around it, and now enabled a process where automatic generation of compliance certificate without any interference based on what is applicable, who's responsible, what got done in time, what got done delayed, what is still pending and overdue, what is the risk level of that, is applicable with the appendix to the board, so that nothing is anecdotal, nothing is emotional, right? This is fact-based, evidence-based. This is what it is. If you're doing well, great. If you're not doing well, come back next quarter, institutionalize the culture, get the best practices going so that the organization looks better in the next quarter than it looked in this quarter. So examples of how technology has helped transform organizations. I think we are past our time. Vishal, bringing you into the conversation here, give us some yarn on what can we do differently, how 2022 can look differently from 2021.
I think much has been said by SANJEEV and Parvesh, and I'll try and summarize that in 2 lines. I think intent and content both need to be looked at. The intent is where SANJEEV emphasized that it has to be top down, but at the same time running through the organization, running with the thread of ethics, running with the thread of being essential and not a burden or a cost. I think that's where I would say the intent will apply. And when we talk about content, I would say compute, automate, get a candidate, get together, collate, comply, and communicate. I think those are the elements where the content would have to be enforced. And if we look at all this closely, as you're trying to do by virtue of your platform, or as and when the government works on the intent side to say that, okay, fine, let's look at decriminalizing while we are 50 years old, right? 60 years old in the nation, but we have not tried this exercise before. I think that's where the intent is changing from the government side, and the intent is changing from the INC side. I think that helps. And when the content on both sides changes, I think we'll have a change toward on this compliance side. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great, very well said. In the interest of time, what I'll do is quickly move on to some questions that are there. I think Vishal has already answered one. Another question by Bala. And by the way, for our audience, please use the Q&A button here. If you would like our panelists to answer any question, please go ahead. There's a question by Bala. A lot of compliances are manual still for more than 70+ years since independence, which should be implemented through digitization for prompt online submission. I think, Bala, that's more of a comment, but totally agree. I mentioned 2,745 forms and formats just on labor need to be digitized. Today, most of them are manual. They are prepared manually, they are managed manually, they are updated to the government through online systems, but there is no auto reconciliation and so on and so forth. So yes, I mean, I agree with your statement. Anybody wants to comment on Bala's statement there? I guess not. Anonymous attendee didn't mention their name. They've said Punjab government recently announced compliance reforms for ease of doing business. So did the Prime Minister. Do you think regulatory bodies like SEBI will look into it? Before I give the question to one of our panelists, thank you for acknowledging that. We worked with Punjab government for over a year closely on helping analyze the compliance burden within the state via our 3-vector framework of rationalize, digitize, and decriminalize. And over a year, it took for us to identify, and then Chief Minister notified a reduction of 493 compliances. So great observation. Thank you for bringing that up. And trust me, I mean, I work on many committees in the government, help them, and there's a lot of interest right now. There's a lot of pressure from the Prime Minister's office. A lot of regulators have been told to review it and rationalize it. And we hope that we will continue to make incremental progress on this. Let me bring our panelists to answer that question.
I would say that yes, last 2 decades, we have witnessed use of technology by the government system, by, various ministries that has tremendously helped in terms of, not only the ease and comfort as far as organizations are concerned, but also in terms of creating that compliance culture as well. For example, let me give you very simple examples, like Ministry of Corporate Affairs. They use technology extensively. Now, today, people are not required to visit the Ministry of Corporate Affairs offices for filing of forms and returns and all that. They are all online. Similarly, in the tax regime also, the use of technology has significantly contributed. I think government is taking initiatives at almost all levels, central government particularly. The very fact that the economic survey mentions the compliance requirements, I think that itself suggests that there's a greater amount of realization in terms of creating that ease of doing business. But having said so, I think what is lacking is the awareness and training as far as government machinery is concerned. Because in mofussil areas where the organizations operate, that message has not gone so deeply. I think that is what is required, along with whatever measures are being taken by the government at various levels.
I think we have just time enough for one question. Do you think it's high time that companies adopt a compliance awareness program which goes beyond product training for their employees? Does industry need compliance awareness courses to be conducted in grad, post-grad colleges? Anyone, Parvesh, Vishal, Dr. GEMAWAT, anybody wants to comment?
Yeah, in fact, on the compliance side, I fully agree with this. Like, we have seen the organization, at the same point is coming again and again, that compliance is a cost center. One compliance officer is sitting, they have to do that. But yes, at the business level, organization are conducting those kind of training. But these trainings like COC and the other training in the system, these training should be part of system. We have seen in our organization, we have adopted that approach. And I always suggest, and with the audience, I can tell to the industry, give this message to the industry that they should start compliance training top level to the down level in the last person in the system, that these are the compliance required, and not only the filling of the compliance, but what is the ethics of the organization which leads to compliance, that should be required. And if not, grad and postgraduate colleges, but yes, there are some private organization or some legal forums which probably can start with, and being a part of legal fraternity, we can also suggest to some our association to start with these kind of things for the companies to deal with as a training session.
I would only comment, Rishi, just a final comment on this, that there needs to be a purpose for an organization. And what is that purpose? Purpose for any organization should be and is the continuity of that very organization. The continuity cannot happen unless you comply with the law of the land. So that itself suggests that for continuity of the organization, that because that is the only purpose for which you are existing. You are making profits, but then for what? For continuity of that only. So I think from that perspective also, the organizations should comply with the law. And of course, the training session, development, etc., they're all part of the whole process. But that realization, that purpose of any organization is continuity, and for the continuity, they need to comply with the law of the land. Thank you.
Very well said, Dr. Gemawat. Very profound sentence there. Continuity being one of the key goals. In fact, the most important goal. Sustainability comes from there. So education is a part of that. Awareness is a part of that. Excuse for poor compliance cannot be lack of awareness. So I think we are 10 minutes past our scheduled time of wrapping it up at 4 p.m. today. But I guess there's so much juice in this conversation. I can go on for another hour, and I'm sure our audience can be there as well. But all good things must come to an end. This session also comes to an end, part of many conversations that we've had before. And first of all, thank you so much, all of you, Parvesh, Dr. Gemawat, Vishal, for making the time and sharing your depth of expertise, richness of experience with us. And our audience, thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience, listening in and asking profound questions. I'll see you next time. Until next time, have a great December. We'll see you in the first or second week of the new year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.